seen this a couple times, so you know what we're doing. My name is Abby White. I did this in 2016, and I am a 3L. I'm in law school in
My name is Nathan Earl. I'm a We the People alum from 2017. I'm a middle school We the People coach from Muncie Northside Middle School.
My name is Steven. I am a teacher here. And I am a lover of government and lover of listening to you guys and your ideas.
Could you introduce yourselves?
My name is Armando Jones, and I intend to attend Purdue University West Lafayette and major in English education.
I'm Aiden Fuchs. I plan to go to Indiana University Bloomington and major in history education.
Who's your teacher?
Mr. Williamson.
All right, so we are going to be in question 1. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and read out the question, and then you can start with your prepared statement and questions after that. All right, so what are the basic purposes of the 14th Amendment? How are questions left unresolved at the Philadelphia Convention addressed in the 14th Amendment? And how are due process and equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment related to principles of limited government? You may begin.
The basic purposes of Amendment 14 of the Constitution are to provide an easier route to citizenship, to ensure the right to procedural and substantive due process for all citizens, regardless of circumstance, and to ensure that all citizens are equally protected under the law. Though historical context behind the 3 main rules of Amendment 14 is quite complex, it is also just as important to understand. There are many relevant events and problems that occurred during the 77 years between the ratification of the Bill of Rights and Amendment 14. Prior to the ratification of Amendment 14, there was no real standard route to citizenship, and the process that did exist mostly only did so on the state level. In other words, for the most part, each state had a different process by which a non-citizen could become a citizen. This was only really a problem because the Founding Fathers had decided to leave that portion of the Constitution vague and open to selective interpretation. Most of the reason behind that was because it was just an extremely sensitive topic. If they had decided to clarify it, it's very likely the Constitution might have not passed at all. Unfortunately, some lawmakers used this lack of clarity to practically do almost whatever they wanted. These unjust laws led to what we refer to as black codes. This gross misuse of state legislative power forced Congress to eventually take action. This was attempted through the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that stated that any person born in the United States was a citizen from birth. Due to this law being ignored, the legislative branch decided that it was necessary to pass a constitutional amendment in order to ensure the right of just solely or law of the soil would not be infringed.
The Philadelphia Convention left major questions about citizenship and equality unresolved, particularly regarding who was a citizen and what rights they were entitled to. The original Constitution mostly focused on structuring the government and establishing representation, which left a lot of room for issues like slavery to take place. Enslaved people were counted as only 3/5 of a person in representation, and there was no clear definition of what citizenship meant. This lack of certainty caused divisions among the states. Southern states depended heavily on slavery for their economies, while northern states had started to move away from it. After the Civil War, these issues became extremely pressing because previously enslaved people now needed protection under the law. The 14th Amendment addressed these problems by establishing birthright citizenship to anyone born in the U.S. As well, it guaranteed equal protection and due process, which ensured that states couldn't deny anyone their rights. It has also became one of the most important parts of the Constitution because it changed the meaning of equality and liberty past the bounds of race.
Our due process clauses and equal protection clauses within the 14th Amendment are used to keep the states from limiting the government or abusing their own power. This is to make sure that the law is fair and equal for everyone that's under it. We have to ensure this to protect the principles of limited government, because if our government becomes too involved within our law force and politics, it can create corruption and mistreatment for our citizens, along with the government itself. This can be seen throughout American history, most notably during the Second World War. Roosevelt, fearing an attack within, gave an executive order to apprehend and secure all Japanese Americans into camps for the duration of the war. To ensure safety for Americans and that no American secrets were handed over to the Japanese. Another great example is during the First World War, where Congress wrongfully arrested Eugene Debs for protesting soldiers fighting in World War I. Eugene was a leading socialist and labor organizer and vocalized his opposition to the war. He got arrested during a speech in Ohio and had a famous court case, Debs versus the United States. His case was never overturned, but was later commuted by President Warren G. Harding. These have all shown us that we need our due process and equal protection clauses within the 14th Amendment, because without these, our states or governments can abuse their power and directly violate civic liberties protected within our great Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, you were right on time. All right, so you talked a lot about the 14th Amendment as it relates to race specifically, but can you come up with any examples of how ideas of due process sort of interact with criminal law?
Well, one of the main ways that due process involves criminal law actually relates to a Supreme Court case. It was Ramos versus Louisiana. And the reason behind that was because states such as Louisiana, and I believe also Oregon to some extent, would allow certain people to be convicted of crimes without unanimous juries, or with split juries, which pretty much just violates the due process clause of the 14th Amendment.
All right, two of you up there said you wanted to be educators, and one thing we have to do as educators is take really complicated concepts and try to explain them in simple terms. So how would you explain due process of law, say maybe to your hypothetical middle school or high school class?
One way I would go about doing that is by saying when certain people who are different in some key ways are prosecuted, sometimes they might be treated differently. And that could create an unfair circumstance in which it is more likely that they are going to be imprisoned, even if they were completely innocent, just because of the unequal treatment that they were provided.
I would agree with what Armando has said, and I would also build onto it by using historical examples. So like examples during like the 1960s, you have the civil rights movements and how like African Americans were being mistreated during that time when they were just fighting for their rights.
So one of the things that the framers of the Constitution wanted was equal rights for citizens, right? How does the 14th Amendment help bolster equality for all citizens, for all people in the United States?
By providing a more clear route to citizenship, the 14th Amendment allows for more people to be protected far more than they would be from just the non-citizen protections built into the Bill of Rights and into the Constitution itself.
So we've talked through a lot about due process so far. How do you see like advancements in technology, say with like investigative tools, how do you see that impacting due process?
I feel like it could be with like convictions. Like you can find easier ways to convict people because there's more technology able to find like DNA samples. You can find, there's cameras. You can see something that happened in time beforehand. There's multiple examples of like how it impacts due process of law.
Do you think that the use of cameras in investigations, like you just mentioned, do you think that that's in line with due process?
I feel like it is in line, maybe just because it's a piece of evidence and you need to make sure you keep an eye on all evidence that is used in a case so that you can get the right conviction.
To sort of build upon what Aiden said, it really depends if the evidence is brought forward in a way that is proper, because if it's not, then it essentially means nothing, and it can't be used.
So, of our due process rights, right to a speedy trial, right to confront your witnesses, the list goes on. What do you think is our most important due process right?
Well, in my opinion especially, the most important of such is freedom from excessive fines and unreasonable punishments, because if people are prosecuted much more harshly than, say, another person charged with the same crime, then that isn't equal, that isn't the same, it's not due process.
You got another one for me, don't you?
I'm like trying to think of a good example for it. I agree with Armando because there's a lot of I'm trying to word this. I can't think of a way to word what I'm trying to say.
So we can, well, look at that.